Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm super excited about today's guest. We'll be speaking to Dr. Leybelis Padilla. She aims to be a resource for patients making healthy lifestyle choices and optimizing their wellness and overall health. Bienvenida, Dr. Padilla, and thank you so much for taking time to connect with us today.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
I really am interested in knowing what is your cultural background and how has it shaped who you are today?
So I am Latina. I am from Puerto Rico and I grew up there for a while, but then my dad and my mom were actually both in the military. And so I had the opportunity to travel the world. So I think my viewpoint and vantage point is really different because I lived in places like Germany for a number of years and Panama. And then I went back to Puerto Rico for high school, which really changed kind of my lens in which I view the world. And and then it made me more curious and open-minded. And and so I think from that sort of like Latina background, but then having been a world traveler at a young age has definitely kind of impacted me at this point. So I think it's everything. And I think I didn't realize it had an impact until now that I reflect on it, mostly because I've had some career changes and I work a lot actually with Latino patients. Right now, I work a lot close to the Mexico border. So although I'm in San Diego, I do some jobs in Arizona, and in that sort of journey through that position, I've realized that had I not came from where I came from or had the life experiences that I've had, I would not be able to make as big of an impact on these patients because they're so thankful and they feel like they can trust me. I can relate to them and I have a lot of empathy. And um, I feel like when you come from a position and of life experiences like that I've had, patients can almost like sense it. Like there's a sense of comfort, and it's a really kind of an opportunity that I have walked into that I really take advantage of. I'm almost like pouring a ton of information to them and trying to make sure that they really understand, and I make that extra effort. I went to medical school at Howard in DC, which is a historically Black college and university. And so, I also have like the exposure to the Latino patient population, but then I have that experience at Howard, which the whole premise of Howard is to help the underserved communities. And so just all of that together, I feel like it's just a melting pot where, now it's just really natural for me to do that.
I was going to say probably that identification that the patients have when they see you is so comforting. I know going with my parents to, their doctor's appointments, it's always lowers their anxiety when they know they're going to see a physician that understands their background and their culture, and has respect for some of the traditions that they have when it comes to healthcare. So I think that, it's beautiful to know that you're experiencing that. And I can only imagine how much the patients appreciate that when they see you as well.
So I think food is probably a huge thing, mostly because it's such a part of Latino culture and it's everything in some ways. And it's what unites us, and so it's all the things, right? Like we like to celebrate around food, and everything is just around food. And I think as physicians, if we can recognize how important that is in Latino culture, then it makes it somewhat easier to treat things like high blood pressure and diabetes and gut health stuff and all the things when you can recognize like these are things that my patient potentially really values. So how can we make more mindful adjustments to, what I'm recommending if my patient values eating arroz con habichuela and just like all these things. And so I think food is probably the biggest thing. And then how important family and like sort of the family dynamic, it's that is another, the hierarchy, the grandma, the great grandmother is like the matriarch, right? And so then there's the cousins and there's all these layers, but it's this sort of, I don't even know how to describe it, but this sort of like family unit that's such an important part of Latino culture that it makes it easier as a physician, when you're treating that patient, to understand, well, maybe you should ask that patient, is there someone, like, can we call your family member, or maybe next time when you come to this appointment, um, have your sister, your brother, your wife, whatever, like somebody come with you to that appointment. And then, I think you can garner more trust, but then also kind of change the patient dynamic with the physician, is making sure that you recognize the importance of the other family members involved in medical decision making and food. I would say those are probably the two biggest things, to be honest.
Definitely the food, I'll agree. And I am also the person, I will raise my hand, who will be on speakerphone when family members have appointments and I'm asking the questions they might be too shy to ask, or that, they just may not think of at that time. So I am the extra patient in the room and the advocate for many family members. I think it's just great to know that that's something that you see as a positive and a benefit for patient care. I know that sometimes there is a feeling that, folks might be embarrassed, or here I go to an appointment and there's, four family members there. But I think it does show to the support and the care that the patient will have under their treatment, and that it's, it takes a village, and the caregivers are an important part in a family dynamic. So being part of the decision making and the information and to ask their questions, I'm sure is very welcome.
Yeah, I also think too, one thing that you kind of reminded me about, it's really important with sometimes there's a language barrier, and it's really important as physicians to get a translator. And so many times I see patient family members trying to translate things, and they get lost in translation. And it also, you want to almost eliminate the burden of the family member having to be that sort of liaison. I think there's a role to, as a sense of comfort for that family member, that can help maybe translate points that maybe need a little bit deeper explanation. Because we all know, like, not all the Spanish is the same, right? Mexican and Puerto Rican Spanish, there's different words and selection things that are completely different. And but getting a formal translator is really practicing, like, cultural competency and respect, and making sure that you're honoring your patient and not just like brushing it off and making it, a more burdensome thing. Really, when you notice that your patient needs assistance in communicating and making sure that they understand, it's really important. Like, it's really your obligation. Like, you have to do it. But I see so many times that patients tell me, like, they've never had someone communicate to them in a way that they understand, and it just, that blows my mind. And I get really sad and irritated about that, because it's just like, it's so easy these days with Zoom and iPad and computer access to access a translator, even if you can't get someone in real life in the room. But that would be another really important point I wanted to
I've
make.
been translating since I was 10 years old, and I'll tell you, some of the things were over my head. I don't recommend it. I agree with you. There's so many ways now that we could take advantage of translation services that, will make it easier for family members to understand what's happening, ask questions, and it's less stressful for the younger folks in the family as well, to be able to know, hey, what I'm then sharing is correct, because you still want them to feel involved. I know some of it is a trust issue. My tia wants to hear it from me versus hearing it from, a translator over the phone. But with that, I'm able to be that conduit, and make sure that I'm translating it correctly for her to understand, and medically correct. So I'm definitely on the same page with you that there are resources that we should really look into when we're talking about translation, especially when it has to do with medical conditions, because there's professional words and medical terms, and then there's slang, and sometimes that can get a little fuzzy.
Oh yes, yeah. My husband, I'll kind of give you a little bit of background, because I think setting that sort of stage helps. But my husband was diagnosed with some mild neurocognitive deficits from being in the NFL and suffering a lot of concussions. And so that was the impetus that really set us off on this sort of health and wellness sort of lifestyle. And through that, we have been really, really mindful of, like, what we eat, how we eat, and lifestyle changes that impact everything, including mental health. and specifically practicing meditation and mindfulness. And these are things that I had no concept of growing up, and certainly not in medical training. And it's only after completing medical training that I've now realized there's this whole world that we're not taught in medicine that patients need to have access to. But um, what I've realized is how important mindset work, whether it's how you talk to yourself, like, like for example, with me running, trying to get to run this race, instead of saying, I don't think I can do this, I can't do this, I haven't been training, like I really need another month. It's shifting words that you use and saying, instead of I can't, it's like, well, how can I? Or if something bad happens to you, it's like, this has happened to me. I can start saying things like, this is happening for me, and kind of figuring out the why, right? Like, what are the lessons that I'm supposed to learn from this experience? And so in training for this, I had to do a lot of mindset work because I really didn't train for it adequately. I it had a vision of like, I'm gonna work out X amount of days, I'm gonna do this and that and that. And none of that really panned out. So I was kind of going in bare minimum, but I knew I could do it. I knew I could do it. And I did a lot of meditating and vision work, right? So part of kind of mindset work is also kind of visualizing yourself to success. And you'll hear a lot of stories about elite athletes will always kind of visualize themselves making the touchdown, running the race, and getting the gold medal, that kind of thing. And it's sort of these habits that lead to success. Because if you are telling yourself you can already do it, you can do it. Like you can do it. Like you're going to find a way. And those sort of mental challenges or breakthroughs is a lot of times what holds most people back, including in like health and wellness space. A lot of times people are like, oh, I have bad genes, or oh, I have this and that and that. And it's easy to kind of fall into that sort of, then it's almost like a rabbit hole. And then you're just like going down this path. But if you make these like small shifts over time in your mindset, then you can achieve it. And that's kind of what I did for this race, because I just had to tell myself I could do it, because I knew I could, right? I may not have performed at my ultimate best, but I knew I could do it. And I did it. And, I finished.
I think I was talking to you on the airplane ride like home. It was like it's so close after you had finished. It was you still had all of the rush and excitement. You had all these goals that you were going to do when you got back. And I felt that energy that you were transmitting there with this experience, and just how rewarding it was for you. When I think about the idea of wellness and of mental health, I also try and remind myself that when I have these conversations with some of the elders in my family, culturally, traditionally, it's something that's not very talked about. There are stigmas to mental health, and also just modern medicine. Sometimes, they have all of these remedies. My mom has a tea for everything. If it's not Vicks, it's a tea. So, how do you think it is a good way to approach that conversation with family, with patients, about just really being open to that physical mental connection, and then also, being open to modern medicine while still respecting some of their, ancestral traditions?
I gotta tell you, that's a really tough one, because I struggle with that with my own family. So I can really empathize at how hard it really is to break those sort of barriers. Um, I think the biggest stigma is maybe the mental health barrier. I think in the Latino patient population, it's really, really tough. And I feel like no matter the progress I may make, or you like rapport or relationship that I develop with a patient, like sometimes then it's like once I start maybe talking about the mental health stuff, sometimes people like shut down. And so, that one's a really tough one for me. And I think the places where I've had success is when I start almost the big, very small. It's like almost like dropping a pebble in some water and then creating a ripple effect. And you literally, you just kind of drop the pebble. And so my pebble weight might start with, the mind gut connection with your gut health. or how, gosh, when you get really stressed, have you noticed you have to run to the restroom and you have this sort of anxiety that's, causing this? Or maybe is your anxiety or depression affecting your sleep? Like, I start with some sort of thought that's translating to their symptom, and then make them think about it, and then they marinate, and then we maybe bring it up at the next visit. So I don't try to do everything all at once, because then I feel like they almost think it's not a genuine sort of inquiry of their well-being. um, and and sometimes I have, especially to younger patients, I will tell them, like, literally, I'll have a conversation and say, like, look, I get it. This isn't cool. Like, this may seem like, you're maybe off or whatever, but this is the deal. And this is why it's important. And this is why it's important for your health. And this is why I care. And so usually when I kind of am very transparent like that with the younger patients, it's much easier. With the older patients, I gotta tell you, it's hard. I think I have not cracked that nut at all.
Well, I like the pebble effect. I think that is the best way. As you said, it's that ripple. It is walking that fine line of making sure that statements like "I care," them hearing you say that I know is so important. I think that's how we would approach it with our family, and gently bringing the conversation. So I love that example as a way to gently broach the conversation, whether it's younger or older, but start with that pebble effect. I really like that. So I would like to say that having the conversations about our culture is always so important, not just Hispanic Heritage Month, but obviously a conversation we should always be having. And as a mother myself, I have this, battle sometimes internally with my girls, that guilt of, am I talking enough Spanish to you? Are you able to communicate with the extended, family members? And I think that there's a lot of conversation that comes around that about our identity and language. And I feel that there's so much stigma that we need to break there, that, being Hispanic, that is our culture. It isn't just the language. Language is a piece of that, but there's so much more, with our music and our food and our history, and our intelligence and beauty, of course. But how do you see that connection? When it comes to kind of relating to kind of the stigma that sometimes we can get about our heritage and our language, and kind of being of two worlds.
That is such a great question, because I obviously, as a mother too, I can relate to that. And having been a military child, so this is kind of like the double-edged sword, right? Like, although I am Latina, I can speak Spanish. My Spanish isn't like grammatically perfect, and it's definitely a lot of slang Puerto Rican. And so with my girls specifically, just as an example, I'm so mindful of that. That although I wasn't like entirely, my whole youth wasn't spent in Puerto Rico, in some ways I feel like I still yearn for that, having had that opportunity. Like, I wish I had that opportunity, because I would have wanted to have been more culturally embedded and just like in it and immersed, because I see the value in that. And so my husband and I have been very mindful in making sure that we go back all the time, and that they're growing up to be fluent in Spanish, so that their Spanish can be better than mine. And so, and that they can be culturally sensitive to others. So we're traveling, and, traveling more than maybe even what I did when I was growing up. And, but I think as parents, we're in a great opportunity. It's amazing, because we can shape these little humans and help open their minds and their hearts, but they're just so impressionable. So you can just really expose them to everything. But I think the most important thing is really teaching them pride of where they come from, their hair color, their skin, like their everything, and their food, their music, all of it. And but then also this respect of others, and almost like appreciation and awe of other cultures and languages and all these things. And because that's really the position my husband and I try to come from. And it's like, wow, like look at these other beautiful people. And so we can all be prideful, but then also like in love with the rest of the humanity. And so that's, we struggle with it, but we're very mindful of it. And so that's like we're always on a position of let's get there, let's continue to get there. Um, but I love the question because it's something that I talk about with my friends that have children, or just um, other people that are in this space. When you realize it's important that we're different, but then yet we're all the same. But you always want to be sensitive and prideful of where you came from.
I love the way you put that. I think that it's the reminder that when we look at our culture, and especially the Hispanic culture, es un sazón. Like we have a little bit of everything. I think we cover the gamut of diversity just within our culture. So as you said, having respect for all of the differences and then the beauty that was brought together to, create all of us, I think is a beautiful way to see it and to share that with our children who then get to go on and affect the world and those around us. So I think that was the perfect answer. Well, Dr. Padilla, thank you so much for taking time to be my guest, for sharing your story, for giving us your insight professionally and personally, and also just sharing the things that I think anyone listening to can relate to, and they're going to remember these conversations as they move forward with family members. And then also just the pride. You are out there representing all of us. And I know that that's something that you are proud of and that we are all proud of being a part of as well. So thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.